Well, good evening, everybody, to Wednesday Night Church. It's my pleasure to speak tonight on the Wednesday night service. Pastor James is actually away for a couple of days, and it gave me a perfect opportunity to spend a Wednesday night with you, as well as make some important announcements about our church. I do believe I have some good news for you. We are planning to reopen Calvary Chapel Santee in the next couple of weeks. San Diego City Council, you probably saw the last few days, voted and sent a letter to the governor to accelerate the reopening plan for not only San Diego businesses, but also for San Diego churches. We were granted, if you will, sort of a pilot program and having met all the requirements. So restaurants and gyms and retail stores and churches are going to meet an accelerated plan to begin meeting again. And we're expecting an announcement on Friday from the governor's office about churches specifically. So as a church, we're preparing. We'll be sanitizing the building. We'll be rearranging some of the seating here in the sanctuary to be able to follow the health guidelines to meet the safety requirements for meeting during this season. Let me say I'm grateful to President Trump and to all the medical heroes that have been part of this pandemic. The sheriff and police departments that have been a big part of keeping us safe. And I'm even thankful for our governor. I know he's had a tough job, and he's been trying to protect us from this coronavirus threat. Let me say, when the stay-at-home order was issued, as a church, as leadership at the church, we cooperated out of compassion. We believe that we wanted to be part of those that stopped the spread of the disease, to flatten the curve and all of that. And I believe, finally have met those requirements, and San Diego is definitely recovering. And let me also add that church to me is not like Walmart or customers at Costco. Church to me is my family. And so I would do anything to protect and take care and make sure that my church family was safe and okay during this season. But let me say now, I believe it is time for us to reopen. I do believe the governor has been unwise and unfair to churches so far. There's been an overreach by the government. I think he had faulty information. There were faulty medical models. And I do believe that they were crossing the line in terms of violating the First Amendment rights of public assembly and worship and free speech. And ironically, they put churches on the sideline. And historically, whenever there's been a pandemic or big crisis in our country, churches have always been a critical part of the solution to bring help during a crisis. And I think churches are needed more than ever. A lot of people are still afraid. There's isolation. There's been an increase of depression. There's been a greater incidence of domestic problems. There's been greater numbers of suicide. And certainly those people who have lost loved ones, there's a lot of grief out there as well. And in my perspective, if we can trust Walmart and Home Depot and restaurants and casinos now to be able to operate safely, surely we can trust churches to follow and meet and exceed any CDC guidelines for practicing safety during this time. So I am glad, I am relieved that the governor is responding to the voice of the people. And let me say, I believe that's a collaborative effort. I believe God is responding to the prayers of his people. God is moving on the hearts of those throughout our country to open not only businesses but churches across America. I think the protests also played a role in the shift of stance about churches. I think there have been some wonderful believers in government. I want to thank Senator Brian Jones, who I've been able to talk to numerous times in the last few weeks about what's actually going on in Sacramento. And then there are about 4 or 5 Los Angeles area pastors that really were at the very point of getting the information to the governor and helping him come to the right conclusions. And then, maybe you saw yesterday, even the White House and William Barr from our Attorney General sent a letter to Governor Newsom reminding him that the pandemic does not negate or suspend our First Amendment rights as churches. Now, let me be honest, though. As a pastor, as the pastoral staff, and the board here at Calvary Santee, we really wrestled with an important decision about opening up the church. We did consider and pray very, with a great deal of importance and a great deal of struggle about defying the governor's orders and opening up anyway. And most of you probably have already heard there's a movement of some 3,000 churches that are opening May 31, whether they have the governor's permission or not. And thankfully, I believe the governor is backing up and is lifting the orders and is going to allow us to reopen without having to do that. But I wanted you to know, as a pastor and the board and leaders of this church, we prayed, we reviewed the scriptures about submission to government and where those lines fall. We got good counsel as well. We spoke with other pastors, men that I respect. I spoke to a handful of attorneys. Again, spent time with Senator Brian Jones. And we have wrestled through what we should do as a church in regards to the government's orders and defying the government's requirement to stay closed. And I want to assure you that what guided us was the Word of God primarily. We are Christians first and patriots second. I'm a citizen of heaven first and foremost, and I'm a citizen of America secondly. And our goal is always, as church leaders, is to please the Lord. There were a couple of issues to consider. Number one, do the government orders meet the criteria for biblical civil disobedience? Like 1 Peter 2 says, and Romans chapter 13 tell us that we're to honor and obey the government. And so we didn't really find that the governor's orders really met the criteria for biblical civil disobedience. In Acts chapter 4, you remember the government in that day told Peter and John to stop preaching the gospel. And then their response is that classic verse, Acts 4:18, we must obey God rather than men. Well, we don't hear the governor or anybody limiting us or telling us not to preach the gospel. We're not being limited to share our faith, nor are we limited to help people. And this is not persecution. I think it's overreach, definitely, but it not yet has it reached the level of persecution. It could, and if it continued on, perhaps it could become, but we're watching it closely, and we believe that we're not there. Furthermore, the pastors that I respect did also not agree. It was about a 50-50 split. Some say we should defy the governor's orders, and some said, no, we're not there, we're not ready. What they all agreed on was this, that the online ministry for churches has been amazing. And like our church, many churches are reaching more people than we ever have before, more people than we ever could by our online webcast ministry. We are literally invading homes that would never darken the door of a church. Furthermore, everybody agreed that if the government does tell us we cannot preach or share our faith, then as a Christian and an American, we would gladly stand and disobey the government. But thankfully tonight I can say that the political winds are shifting. The government and the governor have felt the pressure, and they want to avoid a clash with churches. And so I believe the restrictions are being lifted. That's what we've been praying for. That's what we've been expecting. And so I'm expecting, and I'm hoping to be able to open the doors of the church in the next 2 to 3 weeks with the government's blessing. Now, in light of that, when we open, let me tell you, we're going to be following all the required guidelines to meet safely, and probably will be like that for the next few months, going on from here. So we're going to clean the building and sanitize it, like I said. We'll need to practice the social distancing both outside the building and inside. Probably still have to wear masks, and we probably will do temperature checks. The services for a while will be family style, meaning that your children will be with you. We won't be able to offer children's ministry for a few months yet. And unfortunately, we cannot serve food either following those guidelines. So our guidelines and our service will be very simple. We're going to need your full cooperation to follow those. And here's the worst part. It'll be a no-hugging zone. And I know for this church, that's going to be extremely difficult to live by, not hug or shake everybody's hands and all that. That's been something that's a big part of who we are. So watch the website. I'm hoping by this Sunday I'll be able to make an announcement and actually give you a date for the first Sunday back here at church. but I think we're almost there. The season of drought, as it were, in terms of fellowship is just about over. Okay, now, a couple quick announcements before we get to the Word tonight. Next Monday's Memorial Day, so the office is going to be closed in observance of Memorial Day. We are going to be starting up home fellowship. So on the website, you'll find a form that you can fill out and send back to us that will say, hey, I want to get involved in a small group, and I'm willing to start one online, with Zoom or whatever technology is available, or you'd rather wait until one opens up in a home, and so we can connect you with the right people with a home group in your area. The Endurers Ministry, which is for the senior saints of our church, is going to be starting up quickly too. They'll be meeting on Wednesday first electronically, and then ultimately, hopefully, in a few weeks, perhaps a month, they'll be able to meet here at the church on Wednesday mornings. Other Zoom meetings that are going on, the Disciples of Integrity and Finding Freedom are meeting on Thursday and Friday nights, and you can join in by calling the church office or emailing Tony from the website, and you can get plugged in there. And then, of course, the Moms Connect group is also still meeting. It's a way for young moms to connect with one each other, and they're doing it also via Zoom, and then soon we'll be doing that in person as well. Now, your assignment for this weekend is to send us more pictures. This time there's no specific assignment. The best part of all of the pictures have been the slideshow at the end of the service when we get to see your faces. And so whatever you're up to, whatever you're doing, fun, funny, or just a picture of who you are and what you're doing, send that to us, and we'll put together a slideshow for this weekend, and it will be fun to see what you're all up to.